in January, I got a letter in the mail from the state of Georgia. Generic letter said I was up for a renewal for Medicaid. Here's a website to go to and a phone number to call with questions. I logged into Gateway. There was no renewal tab. There was no link. There was no way to renew. Nothing. So I called the number on the letter. It would ask me for a callback number. Someone would call back and then immediately hang up. And that is how the next several weeks of my life went, just to start a basic renewal for the Katie Beckett deeming waiver. I'm going to tell you the full story today because if you have kids on Katie Beckett in Georgia, this is information you need before you get that letter, because what I went through did not have to be that hard. And some of it was entirely avoidable if someone had just told me one thing at the start. I'm Mary Ellen. I share real-life parenting and Georgia resource content for families raising neurodivergent kids. If you're new here, welcome. There's a whole playlist on Georgia Medicaid content linked below. Okay, let's get into it. So, some quick context. We were initially approved for Katie Beckett deeming waiver for Medicaid in July 2025, but I had sent our application at the beginning of March of 2025. So when I got this renewal letter at the beginning of 2026, my first thought was, is this even right? It felt too soon. The letter said to log into Gateway, which is the website used for other state services and programs, and click the renewal link or call the number with questions. Easy enough, right? I logged in, no renewal tab, no link. I searched for a long time. There was nothing. So I called the number. After being transferred from here and there with the automated system, it would prompt me to leave a callback number and then immediately hang up. And so then me and my husband took turns trying. Same result every time. We did that for about 2 weeks. And at that point, I was still unsure if the letter was legitimate because there was nothing working on the website and the phone number wasn't working either. So then I shifted my call to the Katie Beckett office. A week of calls there, calling every day, and no luck. Finally, I put in a message through Constituent Services, which you can find on the Medicaid website, which if you don't know about that option, I'll link it in the description. It's been one of the more useful tools I've found for navigating Georgia Medicaid. And I also attempted one more call to the Katie Beckett office. Someone had tipped me off that if you call right when they open at 8 a.m., you can often either get a hold of someone or they call you back. And so that's what I did, and I did finally get a call back. But at this point, I was about 2 weeks out from the renewal deadline that was listed on the letter. So here's what the person who called me back explained. The letter was legitimate. What I had received was a basic renewal notice. They said you can receive these notifications 90 days out from the deadline, but I received mine about a month, maybe a little more than a month before the deadline listed on the letter. So the timeline felt off for me because there's a gap from when I submitted the packet originally and when I got approved. The basic renewal happens around the first anniversary of when you submitted the packet, or they received it. The full renewal comes 2 years after you were approved. So I was approved in July 2025, so my basic renewal came at the beginning of 2026, but my full renewal is still not due until June or July of 2027. And they said you can submit your renewals 90 days before the deadline. So 2 different renewals, 2 different timelines, a little confusing. And the letter explains none of that. The person told me to go to a specific website, download the renewal packet, and skip large sections of the application because it's a general packet and used across multiple state programs, not specific to Katie Beckett. And I'll go through what I filled out and what I skipped when I do my walkthrough video of the renewal process that I went through. So I'm not going to get into all of that here, but just know that the form looks way more overwhelming than it actually is. I mailed the packet that week. So after I mailed the packet, I sent some messages to Constituent Services about my experience. Not just to vent, but because I genuinely think this process is harder than it needs to be for families and the staff in the Katie Beckett office. And I wanted someone to know that, because if no one says anything, No one changes anything. A higher level manager called me, and that conversation was actually very valuable. Not because everything got fixed, but because I got some real context and I felt heard. And here's what she told me. Whenever you get paperwork about Medicaid, any letter, any notice, disregard the instructions on the letter and call the Katie Beckett office directly. The letters are generated by a different system, and the instructions on them don't always reflect what you actually need to do. That tip alone could have saved me weeks. I told her that would be very helpful information to include on the letter or on their website somewhere. She said all letters need to go through a committee to be changed, even to change a wrong number. And that process is very expensive. So that's not something they're working really quickly on. I even suggested a welcome letter when families are first approved. Something that just says, here's what to expect. Here's the right number to call. Here's what the renewal process actually looks like. Because I think if constituents actually knew what to expect instead of guessing all the time and trying to figure it out, that I think the employees would have an easier time doing their job as well. She heard me and she agreed with a lot of what I said. But I got the sense that it's a systematic issue that's been known for a pretty long while. She was candid that the office was understaffed, that it's a stressful job, that the employees are often on the receiving end of very frustrated families, which honestly, I get. I wouldn't want to work at a job where people are yelling at me all day. But at the same time, when you can't get anyone on the phone and your kids' coverage is on the line, which affects how you can provide for your kids, but also how you can provide financially for your family, stress levels are high. I do try to be kind whenever I call, even when I'm really frustrated, and the staff has always been kind and professional to me. These are people that are doing a hard job with limited resources, unfortunately. I also told her that I was unsure if I even filled out the form correctly because I was told to skip so many sections. So she looked in the system, but didn't see it documented yet. But she said if I had any coverage issues, to simply call the office back and they would take care of it. But she said to call back the office in a few days to see if they had received it yet. So every few days, I called to check on the status. The deadline of my letter passed, and they just kept saying, if it's in the building, we'll eventually get to it. Call back in a couple days or next week. And that's how it went for another month. And then one day I got a call from the billing department of one of my kids' providers stating that my kids' Medicaid numbers were inactive. I went to the pharmacy. We were charged out of pocket for medications. I called Katie Beckett, left a message, called every day for a week, no response. And in all my messages, I clearly stated that it was a specific problem and that our Medicaid coverage had been shut off. This was not a general inquiry. It was an active problem and I needed help. Still nothing. Luckily, our providers just told us to keep them updated and that they would work with us until we were able to resolve the issue. And we had to pay out of pocket for our medications at the pharmacy because you can't just not get your kids what they need. And I wasn't hearing back from anyone, so I didn't know how long this outage would go on for. After a week of daily calls and no response, I put in another message to Constituent Services. No response. Now, usually I get a response the next day when I do this. Still had no response. The following week, I sent another message. A few business days after that, I finally got a call from the Katie Beckett office. What they told me was, our basic renewal was approved. Yay! Yay! So I did that right at least. And then the services were shut off instead of renewed. A system error. They were going to send a message to our case manager to correct it, but it could take up to 72 hours. So to check with our providers the following week if our Medicaid numbers were active again. The next day, though, I did get a call from the case manager, so it didn't take 72 hours to hear from her. She had reactivated the coverage, and she backdated the start date of the coverage to when she noticed that the outage occurred. so that we would be covered for all that time when our providers went to file their claims. And then a week after that, I received certificates in the mail for both of my kids showing that we were covered during that time. Even though I had a feeling I knew the answer, I did ask the caseworker if Medicaid reimburses families when they make an error on their part and they have to pay out of pocket. And I was told Medicaid doesn't reimburse families. So with this experience, I want to be clear, the people were all kind and professional that I spoke to when I was able to actually speak to someone. And I genuinely understand that the office is understaffed and overwhelmed. I'm not sharing this story to be angry at individuals for doing a hard job, but I also want to be honest about something. I did everything they asked me to do. The whole time this was happening, when I kept checking in with them, they kept saying, just call us if you have any issues and we'll fix it. And they said it like it was no big deal and it was a simple fix. And on their end, it may be a simple fix. I don't work there, so I don't know. But on my end, it wasn't. Getting someone on the phone took weeks. Coverage was shut off. Medications were paid out of pocket. Providers were in limbo. And through all of that, we were calling every day and getting nothing. These families, our families, are already stretched so thin. We are already managing therapies and appointments and maybe IEPs and medication schedules and just all of it. And when something like this happens and you cannot get anyone on the phone and you don't know when it's going to be resolved, this is an enormous amount of extra weight to carry. I don't think the people working in that office fully feel the weight of what it means on our end when things fall between the cracks. And I don't blame them for that. They're working within an inefficient system and they're working with hundreds of families a day. And for them, it's just another day at work. But I want families watching this to know your stress is valid. It's genuinely hard and you're not overreacting. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. 1, if you get any letter about Medicaid, ignore the instructions on the letter and call the Katie Beckett office directly. 2, call at 8 a.m. when they open. That is the best time to get through or to at least get a call back. 3, use Constituent Services when you are not getting a response. I'll link that in the description. 4, if your coverage goes dark, be persistent. Keep calling, keep messaging, and know that they can correct and backdate coverage when it's in their error. And 5, document everything. Date you called, who you spoke to, what they said. It matters. And I'll link that in the description when it's up. If you've been through something similar, I'd really love to hear about it in the comments. And if this helped you feel a little less alone navigating this, that's exactly why I make these videos. One quick update before I let you go, because this happened after I filmed this video, and I wish I had known it sooner. I mentioned that Medicaid does not reimburse families when there's a coverage lapse in their error. That's still true, but I went to our pharmacy and asked them to look up our purchases from when our Medicaid was inactive, and they were able to pull those records and reimburse us in cash for our out-of-pocket expenses. And then they are going to rebill Medicaid directly for the medications. So if your coverage lapses, call your pharmacy or go in and see if they can assist you like they did for me. It's not guaranteed, but it's definitely worth asking for. And I'm Mary Ellen Yates, and this is Growing Together, Neurodiversity at Home.